Test dulu. So bila orang masuk tak kacau kan Syah?
All right. Good morning. All right. Welcome to everyone who are watching our YouTube channel. My name is Salvin. I'm with the Humanities Department of the Faculty of Creative Multimedia at Multimedia University in Cyberjaya, Malaysia. And together with me, I'm here with Dr. Roopesh Sitharan, who's the Deputy Dean of Research and Innovation Collaboration. Also, we are here to actually talk about a very new program, okay, the Master of Creative Multimedia, which I happen to be the program coordinator, and I'll be host for this session. So welcome to all of you to our postgraduate open day live talk. It's actually a 3 day session where any interested candidates could actually come speak with us and just talk about what we can do with you together in your future, in your research, in terms of practice. And then it's also important also for you to find out what you want to continue in terms of from your career, from your previous practice, and what you can do, and what are the challenges nowadays we can face, okay, or we would face. So our session today is for to specifically related to this program, Master of Creative Multimedia, a very new program taught course postgraduate at postgraduate level. And so I'm glad to have Dr. Roopesh Sitharan, my very good colleague, and to come talk about some ideas related to, okay, or in terms of how do we think about the importance and the significance and how do we move on, okay, with our practice through deeper understanding and more advanced or more informed ways of thinking about it, and also how to adapt to the kind of situation that we are actually facing, okay, in near future and also further on. So making creativity matters, but how do we make them? Who are we talking about here? All right, and what are the ways to talk about those stuff and think about those stuff? But most importantly, we need to understand the context and then the real challenges that we can actually look into in order to help us make those decisions. All right, to think about why it's important for me to continue practicing and why it's important or interesting for us to continue to think about how to enhance and also empower ourselves as a creative person, as someone who is interested in also pursuing this kind of thinking. So let me invite Dr. Roopesh to come and present his very short lecture. All right. And what happened is that our flow today will with 20 minutes of presentation by Dr. Roopesh, and then I'll follow up with a conversation with him. And we welcome those who are actually in our Gmeet session or the YouTube session. Our facilitators will be directing those questions to us. So for that 10 minutes of conversation, we will address some of the questions that you have. And then after that, which is about 11:30 to 11:45, right, you can join us at the Gmeet session, or you can remain in this Gmeet session where I could actually share with you more information about the syllabus and the structure. So, right, let's welcome Dr. Roopesh Sitharan.
Thank you, Sabin. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm glad to be in the same platform with you again after a long time. Actually, in fact, my connection with Sabin goes way back. And I think we share the mutual interest in terms of thinking about practice, especially creative practices, and how do we go about talking about this, framing it, and also engaging in conversation about this. So off the camera, of course, we have been talking about these subjects that you have highlighted before, on and off over Teh Tarik and in Mamak stores and all that before the COVID BC. However, I think today this is a good opportunity to actually put some of my thoughts into a formal presentation, and also to invite a wider audience to engage in the conversation that we have been having. Also, it's a good opportunity for us to talk about this in relation to the program that you're going to talk about later on, Master of Creative Multimedia. And I think some of the materials that I'm presenting is also will be a precedent for the talk that's going to take place in the evening from 2 to 5, talking about future of learning. So I hope this will become a good platform later on as we go on to talk about interest that matters on a PG level as well as research and so forth. So without further ado, let me start by asking the facilitator to put up my slides, if you may. Okay, good morning to all. Thank you all for turning up today for the presentation that I have today with all of you. So I've been called to talk about the idea of creativity and why it matters. Specifically, as you can see in my title, hold on, before going to the next slide. Specifically, what was the concern here is thinking about the reason why creativity matters in the context of future, specifically looking at the sort of trends that might emerge, and also taking into consideration the current condition we are in with the pandemic and with the sorts of issues and problems that we are facing at this moment in time. So there has been an extensive discussion in terms of what is the future of jobs and prospect, and in terms of economics, social health, and so forth. So in this discussion, I also think it's important for us to consider the role of creativity within this context and what future holds for creativity, especially in terms of labor force, in terms of the industry as a whole, and also economics and well-being. So it does play a crucial role, and that's the point that I hope to get across today. Next slide, please. So before going further, I think I want to explain first what is creativity. Of course, this is highly debatable definition. A lot of people have different definitions, and also a lot of exploration is going on at the moment as we speak in terms of trying to understand how human mind works. But importantly, I think we can agree on certain basic premise, which is it is somehow acknowledged that it deals with some form of novel original thinking, and thinking about this novel original thinking in terms of particular usefulness in a specific context. So this is me explaining to you that how do we engage creativity, as in how do we perceive the usefulness of creativity. What creativity itself, that's another topic on its own. How to discover and define creativity, I think that's a whole different discussion on its own. But here I'm trying to understand how do we use and make sense of creativity in our living, in our everyday living as human beings, and in the sort of daily activities that we do. So with that, next slide, please. So importantly here, I want to highlight is these three components that we can agree and somehow think about, use as a framework to think about what creativity is. First and foremost, there is this argument that it talks about this novel original idea. Now, what that is still open-ended. However, there is this notion that something is original, is created when somebody is creative, thinking about something creatively. Secondly, that novel original idea is placed into a certain kind of usefulness, something that is applicable to solve certain kind of problems, certain kind of issues, to address certain kind of matter, to question certain things. So there are many ways to think about usefulness. It's not only a very applied sense. It could also be on a level of cognition. It could also be on a level of criticism. So actually what it means is, if you think about it in the context of research, you can also argue you are thinking about usefulness in terms of a knowledge production. How much more knowledge could be challenged, could be expanded, could be questioned, could be discovered, and so forth. So, of course, this is later then translated into concrete usefulness when it is applied into a particular context. And that context is where we have to consider the sort of place, time, and the particular situation we are in. So any sort of novel idea and its usefulness does not operate in a vacuum. So that's what it means by context. It operates in a particular environment, in a situation where we go on living, so in this world. So for example, if you take an example of somebody discovering a new way of traveling, let's say they discover a new vehicle that actually provides a solution for the carbon issues that we have at the moment. Obviously, we can think about an electric car. However, this idea of electric car actually thinks about resolving certain issues with the carbon problem. How can the electric car resolve that issue while retaining some of its benefits that came from the gasoline engine vehicle, right? So what this means is that novel idea, which is to think about a different alternative solution to this, is put into use, and it is applied within the context of everyday use of a vehicle. So I want to have this picture clearly explained and demonstrated so you understand how we go about in thinking about creativity. So next slide, please. So with this, I want to call upon some of the urgency that we are experiencing at this moment in time, right? First and foremost, I think we need to really consider critically what is the context that we are living in at this moment in time. What we have now is we are experiencing a sort of living experience in a digital ecosystem. We are living in a place where everything is interconnected through telecommunication technologies, Internet of Things, and AI and such. So everything is part of a digital environment. Everything is interconnected, and our lives are also part of this system. This is the context that we are living in today. So I have an image here of a world, and I'm calling all of you together with me to imagine a world as a digital resource. And this is not a far-fetched today when we speak about it as a digital resource. But if you speak about this like 20 years ago, it would seem absurd. But today, when we say we are talking about digital resource, especially thinking about it in the context, in the world we live in, it is so obvious. Nobody can today operate as somebody who is living in the modern world without having an online account for their banking operation. For one very concrete example I can give you. Of course, the existing banking system, the banks are still operational. You can still walk up to the counter and do your banking processes and so forth and so on. However, these things are made so much more inconvenient compared to the easy access that you have at the palm of your hand through online banking. So with that, you can imagine how much more other sorts of practices that we use to live in our daily life has become part of this digital ecosystem. Now, this is the argument that I'm being put forth here, which is you need to seriously look at this from a very critical perspective and the future it holds. What is the future of the world that we live in today when we get more and more immersed and become part of this digital ecosystem? So this is something that I would call upon every one of us to go on this journey together to imagine what sort of things that we are meant to expect and what sort of expectations we have over the system to provide certain needs and certain demands that we might have in terms of our content, our consumptions, and also even for basic entertainments and accessibility, communication, and such. Okay, next slide, please. So, what at the fundamental level, what we are talking about is we are talking about a changing context, and this changing by far at this moment in time with the current COVID situation is very uncertain. It's changing, but we have to anticipate one moment after another. We cannot anticipate in a far long distance kind of a trajectory. It's because of the uncertainty of the situation of the world we live in at the moment today. But importantly, this uncertainty also accelerated certain kind of migration more and more towards dependency of humanity as a whole towards this digital ecosystem. And this, to some extent, has been argued by the World Economic Forum in their 2020 report. There's going to be greater and greater adaptation of technology into our lives. And this will demand new forms of skill and also reskilling across the jobs scopes, across the industries, various industries that operate today. So you can see, because of this kind of changing context, and the acceleration of adaptation of digital technologies into our daily lives, mainly caused by the current pandemic situation, we are now encouraged to pick up new skills, new skill sets that are crucially important for us to survive in this evolving context that we are experiencing at this moment. So, World Economic Forum says one of the crucial, utmost important thing is we want people who will be able to indulge in critical thinking and problem solving. These are the top list of the skills that most of the employers believe will become prominent in the next 5 years, and this has been the trend since 2016. Next slide, please. So again, as I've said, you can see, right, this is again statistic that I'm sharing with you. You can see here that what the pandemic has cost us, right? So COVID-19 is actually pushing the companies, right, to scale remote work. So they are pushing people to work remotely from their homes. 83% of the industries in the world have actually adopted this, moving their workforce to work remotely from their homes, from wherever they are, rather than traveling to their work or place, or even engaging in some kind of close proximity with each other. So you can work in isolation as well as work as efficient as you are when you turn up to office through this remote working. Secondly, you can also see 84% of industries acknowledge that this has accelerated digitization. So as I've argued earlier, we were already, even before the pandemic, we were already experiencing this part of a digital ecosystem. But with the COVID, this has been accelerated because at this moment, arguably, one of our main means of communicating with each other, even this very forum is an example, is through this kind of a online platform where we are able to have conferences and discussions and forums and seminar without actually physically being close to each other by being in our own places, yet we are able to see each other, and this is purely mediated through the technologies that we have, through the telecommunication networks that we have. So this has accelerated digitization in a sense. We have to migrate our current operational modus operandi to adopt to certain kind of digital technologies so that it could be easily transmitted, easily communicated among each of us, so that the usual workforce and the usual production goes on. And thirdly, you can see this has also accelerated automation. Because of the digitization, obviously these things can be automated. It reduces the labor force, human labor force, and these are then shifted to certain kind of AI and algorithms and machine learnings and such, so that they can take over some of the manual task of sortings and going through data and cleaning up data, and such kind of jobs is nowadays easily automated because we have migrated to digital platform. So these kind of things, as you can see, these are actually what to some extent World Economic Forum calls it as technological disruption. They have caused a sort of disruption to the existing modus operandi of a workforce, especially that involves human labor. So in that, what it does is it has transformed jobs into new forms of work that demands creativity and innovative abilities, so that the workforce could be resilient for future uncertainty. So what we want now at this moment, if you look at the industry as a whole, we want people who are able to think creatively, quickly, and come up with innovative solution that is very resilient and able to adopt with the changes that is coming. So with that, that is the sort of outlook that we have in terms of thinking about labor force. Next slide, please. And they also have listed the top 15 skills for 2025. So you can see there, number 1 to 5 actually involves analytical thinking, innovation, active learning and learning strategies, complex problem solving, critical thinking and analysis, creativity, originality, and initiative. Now, these top 5, I would argue, are reflective to the very definition that I gave earlier during my presentation today, where I spoke about how creativity is being discussed and defined, in which we are talking about novel ways of operating and also thinking about the usefulness of the novelty of the thinking that we have, and operating and responding towards within a specific context that we are situated. So all these top 5 jobs are actually reflective of this sort of abilities that is demanded from a labor force. So we can look at analytical thinking and innovation actually speaks about critical thinking as in critical examination of the context. So this is a reversal of the definition I gave earlier. You're thinking about the context, you're thinking about the problem, and then you're thinking about what sort of usefulness contribution that you can give. And from that, you go into the novel thinking and thinking about what kind of new solutions that I can provide. These are analytical thinking, like, really thinking analytically, examining the context, trying to understand context to come up with new solutions, creative and innovative solutions. And importantly, these innovative and creative solutions are specific to the context in which we operate, into the circumstances, which is at this moment, I would argue, is uncertain and rapidly changing, right? So I don't want to go through all 3 top 5 of the best skills. It suffices for me to say that all the top 5 that you can see for the next 4 years to come, 2021, is really looking at one of the main characteristic of creativity that is demanded not only for practitioners that are involved in creative industry, but across the board, like every other industry also demands this sort of versatility and creativity in terms of their operational mode. Before going to the next slide, I also want to highlight in terms of point number 2, active learning and learning strategies. I think if you're interested in thinking about those things, you should join in the 2 to 5 session with Dr. Hugh and Prof. Ken. I've spoken to Prof. Ken about these matters. We've been in discussion, and we are also thinking about what it means as a higher learning institution, what sort of changes that is demanded from higher learning institution, and the sort of new learners and creative thinkers that we need to create. So the changing environment of the learning context, of education context, and that is something that is also, as you can see, is number 2 in the list, right? You want to create people who are active learners. And I think this will be covered later on if you join Prof. Ken's lecture at 2 o'clock. Next slide, please. And the next statistic I have, again, all these statistics are coming from World Economic Forum 2020. You can look it up online. It's available for everyone to see. Again, you can see it here. What is high in demand is critical thinking, analysis, problem solving, self-management, working with people, management, and communication activities. So you can see physical activities are becoming less and less in demand because those are taken over by automations, by other sort of technologies that can actually carry out these physical abilities that used to be operated by human labor. So that has been taken over. But importantly, I also want to say, thinking about the idea of management and communication activities, working with people, self-management, these are all talking about the context, like how do you deal the sort of social innovation, the sort of social adaptability that we need for future labor in terms of thinking about what it entails to operate in these uncertain times. So again, I wouldn't say these are far off from creative thinking. It is also still talking about operating within a specific context. So that context does not necessarily mean operating within a specific problem, a real tangible problem. That problem could also mean sometimes problems of dealing with humans, managing with human force, managing with social problems and all sorts of those kind of issues. So this sort of managing of people is also entails some form of creativity and resilience, especially with the current situation that we are in with pandemic and the sort of social illness and problems that we are facing. Next slide, please. So to recap again, so this is what, in a sense, I hope my brief presentation that I hope to convey to all of you, to make it clear, to get across to everyone, is like you can see the top 10 skills for 2020 is actually very, very reflective of the sort of how creativity operates, in terms of how creative practitioners operate. You really need to think about within these three contexts, premise, which is the context, the novelty, originality of thinking, and also the usefulness and the appropriateness. Okay, so World Economic Forum actually predicts these are the things that is needed. We need creativity, we need innovation, and we need ideation. These are the key terms that are being used by World Economic Forum in looking towards our future. And importantly, the argument here is this is very much in high demand, especially with the acceleration of digitization process. So the more and more we are converging towards digital ecosystem, what we are actually seeing is like there's a greater demand for people who are creative in their approach, especially in the context of media communication and such. Next slide, please. So specifically looking in the Malaysian context, just to bring it down, focus to our Malaysian context, this is what has taken place in Malaysia for the past year. You can see 100% acceleration, the digitization of work processes, right? So there's 100% conversion even in our local context to digitization process, okay? And 75% acceleration to work remotely. So you can see the labor force, the actual physical labor that is needed from somebody is becoming less and less because people are able to work remotely. And the actual labor force is actually being taken over by automation. So you can see that this is an important transition that we are experiencing at this moment, and something that we must anticipate and be prepared for the future to come. And I also have listed there the emerging skills that is predicted for the next 5 years. You can see number 1 and number 2, emotional intelligence, and number 2 is creativity, originality, and initiative. This is very, very much more needed in our local industry in Malaysia, especially. So we have a lot of people who are doers, but we need more and more people who are thinkers, who can come up with creative solutions, creative products, creative ideas to problems that we are encountering. This is the sort of new Malaysians that we need, especially in thinking about what is the future as Malaysia participates in the global transition that is going on in terms of economics, in terms of politics, in terms of social conditions with the pandemics and so forth and on. Okay, next slide. So to conclude, this is what I believe, and I would to put this forth, is in order for us to be future-proof, not only in terms as a program, if we're offering a program, in this case, we're talking about Master of Creative Multimedia. This is, I think, should be the area of concern in the domain of creative multimedia, and we are talking about creative multimedia here. So I think these are the three major domains that should be of concern, that should be critically considered when you're thinking about the future of creative multimedia, what it needs to, how it needs to evolve, and what are the things it should consider. So you're looking at context. We need people who are not only able to create, but also understand the context, able to observe and think and reflect upon the context, the situation that we are in at the moment. We need people who are usefulness, provide tangible solutions to the problems after observing and reflecting, that are able to give solutions and ideas that are able to address some of the problems that we are facing in context. And importantly, we need people who are novel, who are able to think novel. So in this question of novel, which I left slightly hanging from my presentation, it is proved by research that the novel thinking usually comes from associating two things that are deemed irrelevant. So we need new forms of combinations, new ways of recombining certain existing solutions. This is not the novel does not necessarily mean you have thought of something that no one else in the world have thought of. No, it's not. That's not the way. I think you need to think of it as finding new ways of addressing the same problems through different ways and means. That's one way. Asking question differently and thinking about it differently so that it can produce a different sort of outcome, a different sort of perspective. So these are the novel abilities that I believe needed in the perspective in the domain of creative multimedia. So these are the things I think from my brief presentation I hope to convey. And I think in terms of how this aligns with creative multimedia, Mr. Saubin will be able to elaborate. And I hope my presentation is useful and beneficial to everyone. If you have any question, please direct it to me. Thank you all. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present, to put my thoughts into a proper order to present these ideas. And lastly, sorry, Mr. Saubin, if I've taken too much of the time. I try to rush this through as quickly as possible. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roopesh. I think it's great. No, you don't take too much time. I think, in fact, there are too much things to be said as well, right? And I suppose that, in a way, shows that the layers and the depth that we need to take to think about all this, and it's certainly not something can be covered in 20 minutes. And I suppose in this way, I think why we develop a postgraduate program in that sense, that how does it extend and what is it necessary to extend beyond how is it different from an undergraduate program, or even for someone who has been a long experience in the industry. There must be some reason that drives whether it's an education institutions or even research center to think about all this, because we have to find new ways to think about this question that, as you mentioned, I wouldn't call it a threat, but kind of potentiality dealing with this digital ecosystem that we need to coexist, right, in for the last 10 years and probably the coming times, right? What are the uncertainty and how do we deal with it? I think that is very, very important. And in that sense, how does it apply to creative practitioners or artistic practitioners? And if we put it in a more specific framework to think about this in terms of a creative multimedia technological driven type of art and cultural practice. All right, as you pointed out that the issue of thinking about well-being, okay, those are very important aspects of human psychology, sociality in terms of expression and artistic and cultural expression. But technological innovation and shift that definitely have changed the way in terms of how we actually deal with time and space in urban situation, in very private or excluded situation, but yet we are still producing. Okay, we are still making things. We need to experience things and things like that. So those are very interesting things to think about. And I wonder, in a sense, going back to the question, is that why is it necessary that for us to think more critically and even to sharpen our practice? I ask this in the sense of thinking about reflecting your journey. All right, you have been graduate from the Faculty of Creative Multimedia more than 15 years ago, and then you have went on to America to do your master in curatorial practice and new media practice, and then you were at Goldsmith College in the University of London doing your PhD, and those are very important things to thinking about new media theory, and now coming back to join the faculty in that sense, right? How do you think about this, and how do you reflect that? I think those are very important things to share from both personal and also as an intellect, as a practitioner reflecting on this situation, right? I think I'll let Roopesh to address that in a sense, and hopefully we can have questions from our any interested applicants or candidates or even listeners, okay, on the YouTube channel. Please send it to us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a very pertinent question, and also it's a question that actually calls upon me to reflect upon my experiences of going through. I think one of the major things that I have experienced actually for my past journeys is like the importance of re-evaluating value, like what it means and what is important. And I think this is only possible if you are able to think objectively. That's one. Secondly, also importantly, is think critically, like you are critical of yourself, your position, and also importantly, the role that you play within the context that you're operating. So that actually allows you to suspend some of the biasness you might have and to reevaluate your value that you might have towards certain ideas, towards certain products, towards certain system of belief and such. So to speak about it in a very tangible manner, I think when back in let's say mid 2000, 2005, 2006, there was a time that we believed that CDs and such will be the future of media, right? And we could not imagine. I was there, actually, to be honest with you, I was there when iPhone was launched by Apple, and it was a revolutionary thing. It has totally changed the landscape of the phone. So, and I was there in a sense. I can share a small anecdote from my experience. I was able to see the phone. Actually, it was leaked. Actually, somebody from the Apple research team actually leaked some of the images and such in terms of before the phone was released. So it was totally mind-boggling to think of a phone that operates by just touch screen. At that time, you can imagine we were using Nokia. So what really reflecting upon the experience, what you understand is sometimes you need to abandon certain ways of operation to come up with novel ideas. The novel ideas is not necessarily offering solutions by improving the existing one. Sometimes you need to be bold enough to say, like, this is obsolete. We need to move on. We need to think of new modalities, new ways of approaching things. So I think this is what we have been experiencing in the media landscape. For example, Netflix is so prominent today because they understood the obsoleteness that is coming with the usual way of mass media delivering content through national satellite TV and such. So it's like they understand the landscape is changing. They understand there is a new form of digital natives that are coming, and they understand there's a new characteristic in terms of how people will consume media. So then they clearly manage to adopt this and also quickly make that necessary change, that necessary solutions, right, to so that it could cater to these future trends and future possibilities that are emerging. So I think to answer your question in a nutshell, I think that is the most important thing. And that's why I feel creativity is an important aspect, because it prepares you and it also encourages you to take those kind of bold and radical steps that is demanded for future leaders, especially to make this kind of critical and bold challenges and ideas to be introduce these ideas if we are to survive of the current global crisis that we are facing in terms of ecosystems and all that, this kind of global crisis we are facing. I think we really need people who are bold and serious enough to make serious decisions and such.
Well, if I could follow up, despite you have mentioned, yes, creativity is very important in a sense that can translate as a kind of flexibilities in thinking, in attitude towards the context, whether social and cultural and economic situation, right? And such that it can lead to a certain resilience of aptitude. But I think the question I want you to engage here is that how do we pair that with technological shift? You have raised the issue of automation, okay? The automation, data analytics, and all issues such as machine learning, right? How can we think about all this or practice, right, as creatives and artistic practitioners, right, and yet engage this without uncertainty? Uncertainty for us, some of us practitioners, is very important. but how to be confident in handling and dealing with this kind of so some might call it a fear of the machine or identification and things like that. But I think those complexities are definitely something that we need to face and to engage them in different ways of thinking about it, right? Maybe that would be, I think, the last questions I will ask. I think because that is also very important, not just because of the in the context of this program that we're looking at, but I think it's actually a general
Yeah.
question. We should be able to should think about it quite in a critical aspect.
Yeah. I think the major thing that I would say is like to equip yourself. To equip yourself with the knowledge, and by knowledge I'm not just saying like just read books and such. I think you need to actually train yourself to think critically, and by that you by exposing yourself in different various sorts of criticisms and various sorts of ways of thinking that is out there. You need to get yourself exposed to these ideas, these ways of asking questions, and the sort of criticism that is there, that is lingering around, so you are aware of that. And I also think um, it's problematic for me. I think if you think about it in a binary sense, in a sense like I'm with you or I'm against you, I think the world is much more complex today rather than against or for technology kind of a stance. So this kind of approaches, I think it needs um, further refinement in a sense, like it needs novel solutions in that way. That's how I would put it, lah. Because I think at this point in time, I think we are experiencing changes that are unprecedented. So we don't have an answer for all the problems that we are facing, and we are figuring out the solutions as it comes. Even in terms of the pandemic, in terms of the certainty, and to some extent, that's what defines uncertainty, because we don't know how to respond. We have to wait and see and respond to it. So the only way we can respond is based on our prior knowledge, like what we have learned, and how we can apply that to analyze and to react and respond accordingly. That's how I would see it, lah. And that's where I believe, in terms of a postgraduate program, in terms of research generally, not even postgraduate programs, in terms of research, it really needs to ask these sort of difficult questions, imply previous mistakes, previous criticism, previous sort of ideas and novelties that was introduced, and to think about it critically in terms of its relevancy in offering solutions for the uncertainty to come. So that this is where I think research must take a precedent, and also a PG program should also be heading towards too, in terms of creating this sort of people who are well equipped to be able to think through and to offer solutions that we might have not thought of.
Yes, I think that those are very good point. I think in a way that we speak about research and also practice in a sense, and I think we should go back to the idea that a solution should never be theological. That is actually the end of all problem. I think
Yes.
we have seen that within the last 50 years and now last 10 years, or within the last few months. Every time we think that there's a solution for certain things, new variants will develop. I think those are actually very pertinent for us to think about how to be a variant thinker and how to be a variant practitioner in that sense. And I certainly enjoy speaking with you, and I think those who our colleagues who known of us too, we know that we can actually talk and talk forever if we need to or want to. But I think we are taking enough time, and if there are any questions, we are welcome to send to us. All right, in the Google Meet or the YouTube. If not, right, I would just meet everyone who are interested to know more about this program at the this Master of Creative Multimedia in the Google Meet link. I trust our facilitators will be providing those links on
Yes,
YouTube as well. Right,
I think
and
it's over there, Sobin. I think they can say that join our virtual meet at tiny.cc/FCM-PG Open Day. Please go to that URL. You should be able to join the Google Meet.
Right. Yeah, and also to remind that what Dr. Roopesh has also set up in the kind of context, it's not just about a creative multimedia as a practice as well, but it's also thinking about how to learn in a new way, or how do we deal with this kind of situation such that we can learn new as well for future, for just not just for our individual future, but actually on from a social and a lot of macro context. Therefore, it will be helpful. I mean, it'll be for those who are interested. 3 to 5 p.m. So we have our very own Professor Dr. Kenyo and the program coordinator for the Master in Digital Learning, right? Dr. Hugh will be meeting everyone, and then Prof. Ken will actually give a very brief lecture as well. So thank you very much to Dr. Roopesh.
Thank
right?
you. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you in another dimension.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.